Greetings from the warm heart of South Africa. Goeiedag, Dumelang, Sanbonani. We unite with the global family in embracing the Denver Conference. With joyful expectation, we await the secret embrace of our Lord and God, in whose shadow we find peace. Samaang handle, hambana gahle, tot ziens. Mag God ons seën.
So, not Germany, South Africa. Germany is still to come. Keep your passport handy. And I always like to know where I'm going, even if I'm confused sometimes. So I'm just going to give us a quick overview for the remainder of this session so we aren't confused. In a minute, Raphael is going to bring the panel back together and they will interact according to the Holy Spirit leading. After that, Raphael will open the room for questions, comments from all of us gathered here, and he'll explain how to do that, so just relax. That will take us possibly the next 45, 50 minutes. Then we will break into breakout rooms. Each of the panelists, Felina, Stuart, Justin, will have a room, and each of us chooses which room we want to go to. So that will take, all that together will take us right up to centering prayer. So just so you know where we're going, because it's a lot of movement, but somehow we'll get the German postcard stuck in there. So I think, at least before the end of the conference. So just stay ready. Raphael?
Thank you, Carol. Well, I would like to call back our panelists, Stuart, Felina, and Justin, just to so they can comment on what we've been hearing today, what they touch, what they think from the presentation of each other. I would like to point out some interesting topics, about what, just a reminder, what Stuart talks about the ministry and the church contemplative practice, what Felina brings up with us unconscious motivations and in the humanitarian service all around the world, this just in social, and what Justin bring us about specialness and activeness and children in school, and I think there's a book I believe from children. I think it's called I believe it's Journey of the Heart for the Children, something like that. I will check it out later, but I would like to hear from you. What were your thoughts about the other commentators? So we can start this time with Felina.
Well, thank you, Raphael, and thank you, Stuart and Justin. I was so nourished by your presentations and just filled with so much gratitude for both of you and the opportunity to know you and do this together. Stuart, I was touched by, I took some notes, a few things really stood out to me. The definition that you offered for the mystical being a lived and embodied participation in the mystery, and how much that resonates with my own experience and how to live in that awareness. And then Stuart, bringing bringing our thought to that spacious attentiveness and artful continuance, and the way that the two of you really emphasized that kind of participation in the mystery, and how contemplative prayer, centering prayer, really deepens our capacity for that kind of life and that kind of embodied awareness. So maybe I'll stop there, and we can see what kind of discussion we get together here.
Felina, what it makes me think of, I had made a note about what you said, particularly about how we're called to have an expansion or a deepening of our consciousness. And I think my own experience as a parish clergy person, that one of the reasons that I think contemplative practice is kind of put out there in the traditional parish, and it's for people who are into that sort of thing. And it gets to what Justin talked about too, is that there's this sense of, there's a transformative discomfort that actually takes place whenever we engage in our practices. And I think that has a big piece to do with it in the particular culture that we live in. We don't have a tolerance for that. We don't have, so I'm curious with the two of you to kind of take what you said and then connect it back, because I think these threads weave on that deeper level around how do we nurture an appreciation of that transformative discomfort that isn't negative. And that's part of it. It's breaking the positive negative duality. This isn't about negative or bad. But to be transformed is to be changed, is to be moved.
Just as I think this is beautiful. The embodiedness aspect, and particularly the tolerance for what you call it, the tolerance for transformative discomfort. Like when I was in Vermont, I had a young man come into my office once, and he had become in the parish and was engaged in some of the contemplative teachings and some of the intensive work we were doing. And he came in when he graduated undergrad, and he said, you know what, I can't figure it out. I want to do some sort of intensive spiritual practice. I can't figure out if I'm going to go into the Marine Corps or if I'm going to enter into seminary. And I told him, I was like, well, seminary is not really going to be intensive like you're thinking of, particularly that kind of embodied and practically speaking contemplative. Maybe a monastery is more what you're thinking about, and a particularly contemplative monastery, assuming that they would take you. And I think for me, there's a real, I find this acutely among men, but also among women too. There is a sense that, you know what, there's a sense that there is more to the spiritual life than the kind of conventional institutional life of parishes, as an example. And there's a real thirst for it. And I think partly for our generation, particularly non-monastics, is also to find a way to also help offer an intensive, it doesn't have to be intensive training, but to orient people is so that they can artfully continue, or the artful continuance is sometimes called spiritual endurance as a translation from the Middle English. And so there a way to understand how to spiritually endure not just the difficulties, but also like really the unraveling of sense of self, the unraveling of the faculties themselves, where you may very well feel like you're just really coming apart. You are becoming nothing. And that's like one of those threshold experiences. And yet, like, not to get stuck there, or a little bit on my end, not to overemphasize the intensive training aspect, because you could very well, as Meister Eckhart said, you could attain the practice and miss God altogether. So a subtlety of like, look, you don't have to fly halfway around the world. Some of you probably should. Like me, I was so hard-headed. Joseph was like, you need to go someplace to really crack your nugget, brother. But I mean, most people aren't as hard-headed as that, and there are smarter ways probably of doing it, which I think contemplative outreach in many ways does. But on the flip side, contemplative outreach could move also into, into the area of offering something particularly for young people, where they could really go deep, like you would in a boot camp. Like this guy would. He didn't go to the Marine Corps, but he wanted something that was gonna, just gonna really rewire him, and we can do that.
But Justin, how do you, and this is part of where I think the rub is for me, not the rub, but I mean, the tension, that creative tension is, I think what this past year and a half has taught all of us. I mean, it's been in a sense like, and we've been thrown into an intensive the past year and a half. And you see that tension in all of us. I mean, in me, myself, needing comfort, predictability, patterns, routines, all of that, that there's this pastoral sense where, I mean, I realize why and where I need that, and how I move through it into those spaces of deeper growth. And that both of those are true. So how do we hold it in ourselves? And Selena, it makes me think about when you were talking, I was thinking about that great Howard Thurman quote. I couldn't help but think about it. Moving and staying centered in the growing edge, paying attention in ourselves to where the growing edge is, and putting our energy there.
For me, real quick, the pandemic, when people say like, oh, now everybody's a Trappist monk, and I was like, no, we're not. This is way, I mean, especially with having kids, like, this is way more intense than my Trappist life was. I mean, I was up all manner of night putting kids back to sleep. And in the Trappist life, you had time for the offices, you had time for prayer, you had time for study. I mean, you were in a pressure cooker, but this pandemic is like a pressure cooker and not a whole lot of support. And the supports we used to get, like going to mass on Sunday, for a lot of people, like those supports were taken away. Going to your spiritual director. I mean, now I guess you could Zoom it, but people going to confession, like stuff like that was just taken away. And the pressure cooker was on. We were looking for toilet paper, and you were face to face with you were in the anchor hold with these, just these same people, having to relearn how to be in public and how close to be with somebody. It was so I think the level of intensity of the pandemic is really helpful in also noticing that, man, we could really use some deep supports before we go into the next pandemic or the next life crunch or whatever it is, to also give us some formation, so that when spacious awareness or spacious attentiveness, as an example, when it does dawn in us, we do have some familiarity with letting be, with being unbelievably uncomfortable. When you have a panic attack because you're wearing a mask in the middle of chanting the mass, like the incense was all in my face and stuff. You saw the video. How do you have spacious attentiveness and have this whatever it was, this episode, because we can work with the spirit to have the subtle nervous system, the body, to be able to have this thing happen to us and still be open to the spirit in as much as grace allows.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think if I could just bring some attention to what you're pointing to, Justin, in terms of, from my perspective, it's like, I think, the question that Stuart's raising around how do we tolerate or teach tolerance for this transformational discomfort, and what you're touching on now, Justin, it's like, I think the precursor to that really is, assuming that there is a foundation of trust in the mystery. Because that then leads to the faith that you spoke about, Justin, that we surrender to, right? And that we let be done to us what we cannot do for ourselves. But we can't get there, and we can't expect others to get there and be able to tolerate that transformational discomfort if there is not first that foundation of trust in mystery. And I think, in our society today, a lot of people are lacking that kind of trust. So raises the question, right? Then how do we help folks return to that kind of trust?
I like to point out that all this thing about the pandemic, it's like what Justin was saying, like a big intensive retreat, but without any organization, completely without not knowing what was going to happen. But at the same time, it was like setting us free, at some point, don't be in control of anything. So I would like to know, before, opening up and just be motivated to all of the attendees, if they have any question, comments to whatever, or if they want to share something, just raise your virtual hand and we will get to you in a minute. I would like to see what you believe about this transformation in communications, the IT, and the contemplation of how we can transmit, how we can use in your respective life, how you think you're changing. I mean, I think yesterday we talked about some fatigue, but I think like this is an opportunity also. But I would like to hear from you, from your respective groups. What do you think about that before going to the public for comments? Whatever.
Raphael, can you just clarify the question for me?
Yes. What do you think about not only the IT, the resources in technology? How can we use it to transmit the contemplation practices around the world? Because we are misusing a lot the communication, social network, and whatever. So I'd like to see what do you see? How can you see that as an opportunity?
Yeah. One of the things I haven't done a lot of work with Zoom. I should say that I got hired on at St. Clement's during the pandemic, and my second low mass there was the first time that the daily mass was going to be live streamed and then archived. And I resisted in my parish in Vermont any recording. And my thing was like, look, man, you got to be here. You got to, if you want to hear the sermon, you want to listen to the mass, you want to see, like, come here. But then, of course, I was the curate and am the curate, and I didn't have a choice. It was like, this is just part of the thing. You're second, and like, let me tell you, like, I was learning the mass all over again. This was the old rite and the old canon, and I was a baby. So anyway, I was all kind of messed up and all kind of whatever. So what I found was Zoom, I feel like, can really do good content back and forth. And now, whenever I preach on the Sunday, it's live streamed, and people can get a sermon. They can get the content fairly well through the Zoom or through the YouTube. But what doesn't come through is being in the presence of the body, being, with people also praying, giving off these fields of prayer and these influential fields of relics as an example, but the music, being inside the music. You could hear the music through your headphones, but like being in there. Yeah, so I think like learning how to properly use the computer window for content, I feel like is helpful. But there's like when I first met Thomas, it like blew my mind off. Not because he said anything, because he walked by. Everything changed. He walked by and I was just like, what just happened in this room? And I don't know, that sort of stuff is so embodied.
Thank you, Justin. I don't know if Philan and Stuart want to add something before going to the attendees.
Yes, my first thought is we don't have a choice because this is the way of the world now. And yet I am concerned about the fallout from this way of being in the world. So I think we have to just, do our best with the nature of the world as it is now, and do our best to continue to create the world as we want it to be. But, the younger and younger generations live online. So as a contemplative, there's a part of me that despises social media, and yet I show up there because that's where everyone is.
Yeah.
And I think it poses a real challenge to contemplative outreach as we continue to discern the presence and relevance of contemplative outreach in the world today. That's where everyone's showing up, and how to skillfully be present to that it's kind of a new marketplace, if you will. That's where people are gathering. And so it is an opportunity for sure, but one in which I think we kind of move through with some fear and trembling.
I think that's very true. That's been my life too. I remember it wasn't long after our church was struck by lightning that I think I talked to you on the phone, Selena. This sense of, we were literally struck by lightning in the middle of the pandemic. I gave a horrible sermon or something, and we were struck by lightning. But it also raised this sense of how there's been a couple of threads of that. I think one is the importance of tactile relationships. We are in a deeply incarnational practice, and oil and hands and water and bread and wine matter. They matter, and they will always matter.
Matter matters.
Matter matters. And we live in this particular situation where it's a both and right now. And that's really how I see it. It's a both and, that we are supplementing the matter that matters with virtual contact. And we're finding ways to live into that. But like you said, we have to be very, very careful about holding on. And because it goes back to what you led us through, Selena, our own bodies matter. We don't just live in our thoughts, and we don't just live in cyberspace. We live in bodies, and we live in bodies together. So I think this is going to be a really important space for us all to look at. And part of the rub, in my sense, to be honest, is efficiency, and driven by anxiety as a parish priest with membership numbers. I'm just putting it out there, because if I can do something virtually to get the membership numbers up, it lessens my anxiety goes down if the numbers go up. So I have to be aware, like you said, that's my own unconscious motivation that's working itself out. That's my own junk. But I really have to pay close attention to that and ask myself, I think, what's most authentic and what's most faithful. And it might change, and it will change moment to moment based on what we can and cannot do.
Thank you, Stuart. Well, let's get started with others attendees. Hello, Pat. How are you? You can talk now.
Oh, there you go. Hi, beloveds. I want to thank all of you for this. It's so incredible and so wonderful to see the fruits of that 2017. It's so interesting to me that this has come up because when the conference ended last night, there was a bunch of us from doing the conference that gathered for dinner, and this very conversation came up. And I think 18 months into Zooming, it's coming up for a lot of people because of many different things, But the thing that's come up for me over the 18 months is, in the beginning of the lockdown, the fact that we had Zoom was just incredible. I mean, I was sitting today with Silence at 6 from Ireland, and that was 11 a.m. my time. So that was a daily practice. When George Floyd was killed, I was sitting with the Minneapolis group that Carol Quest leading. It was supposed to be for 4 or 5 days. It ended up, for me, being months, and it's still going on. But the longer that I've been into it, the more I have to look at the shadow side. And, part of it is that this incredible ability to connect globally, because the Irish group grew from 7 people in Kildare County in Dublin to 71 that was everywhere, all over the United States, Australia, blah, blah, blah. So the connections, however, I got formed at the Lama Foundation, and I also got formed by having 9 kids, as Justin would point out. And I got formed by serving retreats, for 34 years. And in that formation process, as Justin pointed out, you're in a friggin' pressure cooker. And you stay in that pressure cooker until you are cooked just right. And then you take that back out to the world. And that opportunity, you don't hit those edges on Zoom. You only hit them in person. For me, I'm seriously looking at, that being part of the shadow side. I'm also recognizing that, I was sitting 3 hours a day during the pandemic. So a lot of sitting practice, But what's it doing to my physical body? I'm not moving. And so I'm questioning, I'm seriously looking at all this. Oh, I'm so glad you guys brought this up.
Thank you, Pat. Let's continue with Mary Jane.
Thank you, Raphael. And thank you so much, Eileen, Stuart, Justin. Nice to see some of you again. I've missed you over the last year, so. My question very much relates to a bit of what Pat was talking about and what Philina raised about embodied practice. And it also links to Justin, your story about being with the waterfalls, and Mark. I'm so sad Mark couldn't join this conference. I know he was supposed to as well. And my question goes further than talking about, the essential question I think we're talking about is, can we continue to build in-depth community without having embodied connection? But my question goes further. Can we continue to do this, build this community meaningfully without that embodied connection, including the more than human world and nature? And how where, I guess, Justin, when you were talking about that young man who wanted a boot camp, and how do we support people, especially through very difficult times like this? Part of it is our bodies need that. They need the stimulation. They need the amazing wake up that nature gives us in so many different ways. And so then for me, that's the rub, is Zoom is almost taking away from, again, that connection with nature, the outdoors. Spending time with humans is wonderful, and we can do that on Zoom. We can't do that. We can't spend time with nature on Zoom. It doesn't work too well. So anyway, I think that was just, it's a question for me, because how do you build that community? First of all, virtual, how does it work virtually when we're not in an embodied place? And part of my question comes from this book by Douglas Christie, The Blue Sapphire of the Mind.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's talking about the early practice of, monks and monastic life was very much grounded in place, right? And my last little thing I just want to say is I had the opportunity to be at Snowmass just before the conference, my first time being on a post-intensive there. So I just want to share, I don't know if you can see this, this little rock I found that for me, the mountains were part of who gave me that, they were my teachers. Thomas is not there anymore. Beautiful monastic community is still there, but I believe part of that are the mountains that are around there. So I just wondered if you had any comments.
Mary Jane, I love that you've raised this. I think it's absolutely crucial. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the pandemic has pricked our consciousness about our relationship to the natural world. The disease is affecting our lungs. We're destroying the lungs of the planet in the Amazon. And the numbers of people going to state parks and other places of nature really skyrocketed during the pandemic. And so people are naturally, I think, being drawn to nature in a way that perhaps we haven't before or in recent times. So I love that you've brought attention to this. And I think, furthermore, with an illness like COVID, we know relatively so with the science that if we're outdoors, it mitigates the potential for contracting the illness. And so perhaps we just need to get really creative about local gatherings in the outdoors. Just going to take a few courageous people to, rethink our centering process in the way that we've gathered before. And maybe and speaking to Pat's point about, sitting for 3 hours a day may not be so good for my body. So could we combine these realities and meet in a state park or, a nearby forest and somehow rethink the way in which we're sitting and walking meditation and forest bathing or earthing, or just start to combine some of these practices in a way that connects us more deeply with, the whole planet, really.
Thanks, Philana. Let's hear about Isabel. Puede compartir. I think she can give you another view on this topic about your now.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Well, if it were not for Zoom, I would not be here. I would not be able to be here because I am almost 82 years old. I've been on this journey for many, many years, and I've been to many, many conferences in person, but I am not able to do so. Even without the pandemic, I wouldn't be able to do so. And I really think that the Lord is giving us gifts, and we cannot say either this or that. They are gifts, and they are wonderful gifts. In my experience, and I think that of Rafael and many of us in ECI, Meditation Chapel and our gatherings through Meditation Chapel have created community that are as deep as those that we find in in-person groups. I mean, incredible communities. We are able now to share resources with communities around the world about translating, subtitling videos. We can create a global community thanks to this gift. As to the shadow side, I think it's a bit early to make judgments about it. It's only been with us a few months, and definitely we have to keep. One thing that worries me is this pressure of speed. You have to do things very fast, like with WhatsApp and Instagram. But these are gifts that the Lord is giving us. And when St. Paul could not be with the people in person, he would write letters. He used whatever was available to him. So for us in ECI, it has, it has opened up a completely new world. In Latin America, we are reaching people that we would not be able to reach because being in person is the caviar of the menu. It's the luxury of the menu. But that menu is not available for most people. However, this is not available to everybody either. Not everybody has access to this technology, but it has opened this to the world and to be able to build a global community. So in our experience, it has been fantastic. We have to beware. And I celebrate with the monks on Sunday, and I feel part of of a community with Snowmass by being with them live. So, I think it's not either or, it's both and. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Isabel, thank you. So Mary Jane mentioned this book, Blue Sapphire of the Mind. And I grabbed my copy because I had bookmarked this page in here, and it asks this question that I keep going back to that says, is it possible to recover a capacity for intimacy that can help us overcome the profound alienation and contribute to a more thoughtful, tender response to the living world? And I think that's the underlying deeper thing is intimacy. What does it look like now? And hearing you say that about St. Paul is so true. One of the most meaningful things for us in the parish was actually to write letters. When email didn't cut it, we just started writing letters. And so we would send stationery to people and just write each other letters and notes. And we have stacks of those still, and we're still getting them. So, we do find these ways.
Thank you, Stuart. Let's hear from Polihua. I'm sorry. And now you can unmute.
Okay, now I can unmute.
Yes.
Mahalo nui. So I'm Pulelehua, I'm from Honolulu, and I have been doing virtual realities for 30 years. Educational technology libraries. I've been connecting to people, and there's certain things you can do in this environment you can't do in any other that can really build community. Like I can see all of your faces as if you were breathing on me. This would not happen in a face-to-face environment. And there are many ways. So, okay, I'm young at heart. I take my phone with me with Zoom on it, and I go out to the beach in the morning, and I meditate with my Zoom group while I'm sitting at the beach, because I really value being with other people, but we're right now in a stay at home safe, blah, blah, blah place. So that's the way I can connect to them. So there's many ways we can use this tool, this delightful, and there are other more immersive tools than this, but this is a great one. It's out there, it's cheap, it's easy, anybody can use it. And even within this, there are things we can do that we're not doing that we could do to make this feel even more connected. But part of it is to recognize that we are embodied separately. And so to recognize I'm seeing a window into your home, or in my case, you're seeing a window into my sunrise this morning. But I am seeing that, and I'm seeing something in you I would not ever see normally. I wouldn't see your home. I wouldn't see you in this place that you're taking the risk to and this challenge to give to me. So in this time, I'm a mover, I'm a dancer, I do sacred dance and these things. And what I've done now in my contemplative groups, the ones I lead, is we now do embodied practices as part to remind people they're in their bodies, to take and tactile, oh, let's embrace. So I invite you all, take your hands, put them on your shoulders in this moment, embracing this moment with the divine indwelling. Take a moment to be in your body. Because yes, my proprioceptors can't sense you because you're on my two-dimensional screen, but I can sense you here with me. I can invite you to reach out from your place, show me your hands. I can invite you to reach in this circle. I find this in some ways, people will share things in this place they would not share anywhere else because they're in their safety of their home. They're in the safety of the practice that works for them. And since I'm someone who's moving around all the time, I'm standing while I'm talking to you. And that's not going to bother you because I'm in my space doing that. But you too could do whatever connects you to this. So I want to say I'm so glad the rest of you are here with me because I've been here in these virtual spaces for decades now. And I'm so grateful that you're all here with me now. To me, it's like the best gift of this time is that there's a whole bunch of more people that can become comfortable here. But we don't forget nature and we don't forget our bodies. But we do need to remember when we're in a group that we as the leaders and we as our participants need to remember our embodied presence and the world around us and the air we breathe.
Thank you, Balina. Well, we all almost on time, so we have 5 more, and after that, we're gonna go also to the breakout room so we can continue our conversation there. Let's hear from Jim. Okay, now you can unmute yourself.
Okay, there, I got it. Sorry. First of all, thanks for sharing your lives and giving us your spin on this global embrace. It's been very enjoyable. A couple things. I don't know if it's because I'm a past life, I was a television engineer. And so I have a different idea on these little Hollywood squares meetings. And it's been said already but you can experience the spiritual energy of other people virtually. It's happening. And I started a centering prayer group on Zoom before the pandemic. So it's been 3+ years or so. and it's really happening. Another thing is, like other people have said, the pandemic has brought our lives into a pressure cooker. I happen to think it's pressure cooker plus, because it's brought us to needing some kind of spiritual psychic support in a way we didn't know before. Like, well, it's like falling endlessly, trying to grab onto a handle. But God, I really believe God is bigger than Zoom, Amazon, Google, Facebook, all these tools that we've been given, and then we speak of the shadow side, because it is like our brains can't handle looking at 25 faces at the same time, and like we're talking to one. That's what creates the disorder called Zoom fatigue. And so then people, I'm burned out. I don't want to do Zoom anymore. I want live groups. And like other people say, this is just where God has led us. He's given us the gift of Zoom. And like email, people used to say, oh, we don't, and social media, we don't meet live anymore. So it's only going to cause us to desensitize and not be human anymore. And I don't think that's happening, even though it might be happening at some level. And so it's going to take a while for us to learn, for our brains to be rewired in such a way that we can learn to build community. And I think Zoom even has a chance to accidentally bring global peace, because we are seeing people in their rooms in all different countries. I'm also a 12-step member. We used to say, go to 90 meetings in 90 days to see if we really fit. Now it's like, go to 90 meetings in 90 countries and see how you fit around the world. So anyways, I just wanted to share my so-called engineer type vision into this spiritual matter we call global embrace. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. Let's hear from Maggie and then Chris.
Thank you, Raphael, Elena, Stuart, dear friend, and Justin. I loved your presentation. Beautiful. I am so thankful for you and your witness. I would suggest, I want to echo everything everybody else said, but I would suggest we are being called to be like Anthony in the tomb, in the fort that Thomas wrote about. Everybody worried about him. They would hear shouting and yelling and so forth. And when he came out, he was just fine. And they say, where are you going? He says, I'm going back in. And I think and also we're called to be like Julian. We're given an opportunity that doesn't come along every day to be really, really stretched and go way beyond what our vision was, to see way beyond what we received. Another gift the pandemic has given is it's ripped the veil off pretension, and it's shown us people's priorities. We can really see and so it's made us reevaluate our priorities and make them good. So good is coming out of it. I mean, I think Black Lives Matter emerged because we were all stuck in our homes watching our television and just being alarmed at what we wouldn't have normally paid attention to, and the complete injustice that we were seeing galvanized everyone. So we're getting we're getting common goals together. And you mentioned that Thomas wanted to gather you guys because he wanted to get to know you, to know each other. I'm so thankful, I know Stuart, that we have a group that we do in Atlanta, and that's it, right? We're getting to know each other. We're on the journey together. And he wanted us to travel the journey together. So, and Zoom is exploding that. You know, think of this global embrace. Here we are from all over the world traveling together. And I'm thankful for that. And thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Chris, and then Pamela, your last one in this large group.
I just want to thank everyone for this wonderful session and just share an experience I had during the COVID, where the only safe place I found was in the outdoors. And I had a chance to take a 7-day solo backpack trip on the AT trail. And during that backpack trip, because of the technology, twice I was able to participate in centering prayer sessions and share the pictures and the beauty of the mountains with the people who couldn't be there. The chirping of the birds in the wilderness in the evening that the folks back home didn't have a chance to hear. The wild turkey who crossed just in front of me as I was sitting in silence and scared me, but I was able to share that picture with the folks. So this idea of the wilderness and technology in my life, they're not incompatible, and that they go together, and what a wonderful gift they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Pamela?
Hi, everyone. I actually have a question that I'd like to hear all of you respond to the extent that we have the time. And that has to do with teaching centering prayer in a non-theological way, or to a Protestant audience. I know at least two of you are in a sacramental Episcopal context. But for example, I've given centering prayer introductory workshops to young people, most of whom were from a Protestant background and recovering from that Protestant background. And I had an experience where this beautiful 20-year-old young woman said, well, I'm going to meet the devil in silence. And also the language of the theology that's currently in some of the ways that we teach centering prayer can be off-putting. It can be just the wrong language. And in some of the other sessions, we talked about how the language has already been adjusted, for example, in the 12-step tradition. So I'm just wondering if you could each speak to maybe your experience with bringing centering prayer to different audiences, and maybe how you've translated the language or changed the context.
Pamela, thank you for that. I'll go very, very briefly. For me, I found it's very helpful to always pair my Christian perspective, my Christian grounding with Buddhism. I remember taking, there was a parish confirmation class at my last parish, and they would not talk about prayer for many of the same reasons that you just said. They had all been burned. They had certain, impressions of what it was. So I took 26 of them to Drepung Loosling here down in the city. And Geshe Fende did a private session on training our minds and paying attention to our minds. And they just opened up. And then once I got them back, you couldn't stop them from talking about prayer. And so I think being intentional around spaces like that and really honoring an interfaith component can be very, very helpful in breaking through some of those preconceived notion?
My experience has been that when we have to present the conference, we take into account the audience. So when if we are going to a place where they don't have a Christian background, then we translate the language for no inclusion to the Christian tradition. That has been my experience. So in Dominican Republic, I will say that we tend to look at where we're gonna be talking to and take into that consideration. So we have a minute if Elena or Justin want to add something before we move to the breakout rooms.
Well, I love that you brought this up, Pamela, and I'm just sitting here thinking, it's interesting. Thomas, he had, of course, such a universal realization and understanding of the great mystery that we understand through the personified Christ. But he had to bring us all along first with the very Christian framework so that we would buy in. And now we've bought in, and we have to now figure out how to make this practice accessible to a growing population that is, the surveys show, right, that fewer and fewer people are identifying with organized religion. And so we've got to be creative with our language, like Raphael's saying about figuring out inclusive language for people who are not ascribing to a Christian faith or even put off by the Christian faith. And I think we can do this. I think we get to the essence of the practice and we get to the essence of the teachings. Jesus was not Christian, and yet his message came through to people of different religions. And so I think we have to find the way to do that too.
Thank you, Felena. Justin, if you want to say something.
Yeah. In my experience, I've certainly taught in, like, for instance, yoga studios where almost no one was Christian, and situations where a majority of the folks were burned by Christianity. My personal approach is, first off, like the Christian theology needs a rehab, I would say, from a more contemplative standpoint. And you can, personally, I like to run through the Christian tradition from its contemplative lineage. So in many ways, I think most people have never even heard the essence of the Christian tradition. And to me, that is such a heartbreaker, even in like parishes, like the stuff that is preached sometimes, it doesn't teach at all on the contemplative tradition in Christianity. So oftentimes, I studied Zen Buddhism in Japan in one of the great monasteries there, and I just did the Zen practice. So part of it, I think, also is everyone has healing to do, myself included, healing to do on the bad rap, the bad experience I had with Christianity, and even the bad experiences I've had with Buddhism. All of us, that's all healing to be done. And in my situation, since I'm a priest, I just go as myself. I go as whatever comes up, and sometimes it's responding to the group, more consciousness language, more interior faculties language, sometimes more overtly theological language. Now I work in a very devotional Anglo-Catholic setting, so the language is very, very devotional, very sacramental. But really, the depth of our practice, I feel like oftentimes really responds to the people who are right in front of us. And the biggest thing that I feel like any of us can do is really bring as much of the depth of our own embodied practice right face to face with somebody. And in that way, if somebody, is a Pentecostal, they bring that full embodiment, like Thomas would have us do, for instance, in the inner spiritual dialogues. You come from your own tradition, but also you want to be converted to the other person's tradition. When the Geshe would talk, we all wanted to be converted to whatever they were, whatever their tradition was. Oh my God, convert me to this Mahamudra practice, And when the rabbi spoke, the same deal, like how can our tradition also be free of itself and also be in the tradition, I think that's probably a growing edge for, I think, Christians in general, but also for non-religious people, wherever your tradition is, it come from it so deeply, and also from beyond the self. And I think in that way, the tradition is less of a block. With content, particularly like with written content or even Zoom content, the language, it can be a block also because it can be so content oriented, but that's not necessarily true, as a lot of people have already witnessed. So I say go for it.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Philana and Stuart, for a wonderful conversation a global wonderful conversation in this conference. So I think Carol or Mark, but I can take it over from here.
Yes, sir, I am happy to. I hope I am live here. Lots to think about, lots to hold in our hearts, lots to let the Holy Spirit unpack for us. What a rich time you have given us. Just so people are not confused, we're going to take about a 1-minute break. I think we're going to get a postcard, but if we don't, just go to your breakout room, just see what happens. But before that, I want to let you know that centering prayer will be right after the breakout rooms at the half hour. And then we will have a final session, I believe at 7:00 Mountain Time, but check the schedule because I'm not in Mountain Time and I get confused. But at that final session, we'll do Lectio Divina, which is another practice that will take us, just an important part of our practice. Father Keating says that two practices go together. And then we'll have some final comments that will really help us go forth from here. And then this whole Zoom place will stay open for a social hour, in which time people are free to use the chat to go on continuing the conversation or to connect with each other, however that manages. So the conference will go on longer than planned, and it also will continue in an evaluation that you all will receive down the road. But I'll tell you more about that at the final session. So right now, I think we're going to break for a postcard and then move to centering prayer. No, move to breakout sessions.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I'm Chris.
I'm Katarina. I'm Tanya.
And we have just started the centering prayer movement in Bavaria, in Munich. And we are sending greetings to the entire centering prayer community worldwide. We've just had the first meeting, and spiritually we also have our members Anna and Irene with us. And we want to extend our greetings to all of you and invite you to come to Bavaria to sit with us.